So really glad to be with you. As Don said, we've been developing a relationship over the last few years through the education realm, and people that one of our partners from Western Canada, good friends with Don, and so we've just been connecting that way, and really excited about what God is up to here in Hamilton. And I've watched, I was going to say from afar, but not very far. Actually been very involved in Hamilton for many years. So we moved to Simcoe in '89. And at that time, I was part of the Pentecostal Assemblies, and I was part of the, so this was the district of Hamilton. So in and out of Hamilton for 35 plus years, and watched some of the great things that have happened and some of the challenges the church has had in coming together. But I believe it's God's timing for what he has in store. And so let's see what happens in the next few hours, and then let's see what happens in the next few months, because God has a plan. And if we're smart, we'll worship and listen and obey. Right?
Yeah. Good advice.
So October of '95, I had an open vision, which was really my call to cities. I would say prior to that, I would have called myself a revivalist. So back in the 80s, went to Bible college. My favorite course was revivals. I remember writing my last paper on, could God do it again? And I made all the historical reasons why Finney was right and Wesley was right and all these things could happen and God could do it today. And, actually very engaged in many of the revivals that happened through the 90s. Toronto was significant. Pensacola was significant. Holy Trinity Brompton was significant. Lakeland, Florida. I mean, God really did many, many incredible moves that many of us experienced, right? I would say after what I experienced in October '95, I felt like God changed my calling from being a revivalist, and not that it ended, but to go after Reformation. That God wanted not just to have a blip in the map of something he did incredible, which was great, and we're all thankful for revivals, but actually that he would come and change the culture of our cities and nations to be stamped again with the kingdom of God. And so we would really see the kingdom in business, arts, seven mountains, spheres, however you talk about that. So in October of '95, it was a Sunday night at our church in Toronto. We just got back from a youth retreat. The kids prayed for me. I ended up on this floor for a long time. And while I was on the floor, God gave me an open vision of his heart for cities. And what was happening, I was walking towards, I didn't even know what I was walking towards. It looked like a cliff. And as I was walking there, I saw a gentleman sitting on a rock looking over the cliff. And as I got closer, I knew it was Jesus, because I heard in my spirit, Jesus still weeps over the cities. And I looked at him and he was weeping. And he called me over to him and he showed me what was happening below. And it was a city, and he showed me the things that were happening. And there was a number of things that he pointed out, and I won't go for the time, I won't go into them all, but it's in my book.
Yes.
See what I did there? And I'm a little bit driven, I want to act on things that God says. So I remember getting up off the floor saying, let's do it, God. And he said, you can't do it, Brian, because you love the idea more than you love the people. And I said that. I said, whoa, I did. I said, come on, God, what do you think? Anyway, he was right. And it's not like we were bad people. We were serving the Lord and blessing people. But it was true that God needed to do some internal work so he could do more external work. And so the one of the taglines of the book is, it's transform people that transform cities.
Right.
Yes.
So we set out, and I don't know if you remember the '90s, but you remember the videos that came out from George Otis Jr., the big carrots. Remember the big carrots from Guatemala, and God was changing the world through transformation. I was like, that stuck in my heart. And so after '95, those are the kind of things that kind of stuck in my heart.
Yeah.
And then I met Ed Silvoso, and he changed my life with a book that he wrote called The None Should Perish. And we had numbers of years in that network, which is amazing. Jordan, amazing. So bless you. And so bring up to speed to now. So this book is about kind of a lot of those things, and then what God graciously allowed us to be part of in Brantford.
Yes.
But let's quickly get to these guys, because Tony and Dennis. Tony with City Vision, Dennis with Rooftop. These guys are doing it. So I'm not going to take Tony's story because he's going to share it with you. But amazing guys. Met Tony, let me see, 7 or 8 years ago, I guess, at a transformation conference in San Jose. And we started talking about what God was doing. That was might have been the year they released our video, Tony. I guess that might have been what happened. And then you and I started talking about what God was doing all over the globe. And we just didn't stop talking. We just kept talking. And so Tony's got some incredible insight that he's been working on over the last 10 years, and a platform that I think will be groundbreaking for collaboration for cities back and forth locally, but also globally. So it's really a privilege to introduce Tony Hodges.
Thank you. Thank you. Number one, can you hear us and see us okay?
Good, yes.
That's good. That's good. I would love to be there physically with you. I was trying to work out, and thank you for the worship. That was beautiful.
Yeah.
I've probably been up and down the 401 about 50 or 60 times. So I'm a sort of working knowledge of the area, but I love Canada. My aunt lived in London, Ontario, and I came out many times to visit her. But let me introduce my friends. First of all, Dennis will be saying quite a bit more, but just if I could introduce a couple of words from you, Dennis. You'll be saying much more in a minute. You're on mute at the moment. Anything that you want to say just to kick off before we dive in?
Yeah, just briefly, I'm Dennis. Excuse my voice. I've got the flu at the moment, so if my voice keeps cracking up, forgive me. I live just to the east of London, and it was lived here most of my life. My story, very quickly, I came to faith in Christ having been a completely never churched person. Met Jesus on a train, reading Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. And the rest of my life has been spent trying to convince the church that we need to be joining Jesus on trains and other places in the world rather than just going to church to meet him. I guess that's the quickest way I can put it, because I believe with all my heart that Jesus is on mission everywhere, and he's calling us to step out to where he is to join him there. So that's and the ministry I lead, the Rooftop, is based on Acts 10, Peter on the rooftop, and the paradigm shift that he went through to step outside of his walls and build the kingdom of God among the Gentiles. And what we're about is really communicating with the church today that in many ways, the church is more like Peter before the rooftop than after it. We've added so many customs and traditions and habits and ways of doing things and focused on what we do and expecting people to come and join in with us rather than seeing Jesus on mission in the community and joining him there. So that's the Rooftop. One last thing, if I may, Tony, just say this, which could be significant in what we're talking about or not. But on October the 5th, next year, 25, we're doing something called Joining Jesus 25, which will be happening in around 100 countries around the world simultaneously, which is all about the church saying, how do we be the church in this city and in this town, rather than what continually happens, every church kind of doing its own thing. I'll say more about that, not Joining Jesus 25, but about that challenge we all face as we look at what it is that we're seeking to do in Transform Cities. So you're all invited to be part of that if you'd like, but that's enough for now. Tony, hope that wasn't too long.
No, that's great. Dennis has become a very good friend. We tell a funny story about how we got to know each other, but we won't go there right now. And he's the chair of my informal oversight team. Probably been to more countries than most, about 78, and it's moving towards 100. But a thoroughly good guy who just blesses me with an awful lot of wisdom, and I'm very grateful for God to bring him into my life. And then we have Andre, whose name I can never spell, but do you want to say Andre's a GP, and he's recently started to run very closely with us. We're looking at how this might work with him on board next year. So this is an exposure to him as it was last week when Brian was over. Do you want to say a few words, Andre?
Yeah, I mean, I had a wonderful time. Can you hear me? Yeah, it's Andrzej, Polish. Will forgive you. I'm Polish born. I live in Sheffield, UK, with my wife of almost 40 years. We've got 4 children, 7th grandchild on the way. I've pastored for almost 30 years, main gifting being evangelism. Since retiring from general practice over 12 years ago, I've worked in a charity that we set up as a church, volunteer coordinator, and I've since started a small not-for-profit beekeeping enterprise, social enterprise, and co-founded a charity for furtherance of the gospel in Nepal. I chair that. And I coordinate, as you'll see from the label here, Hillsborough churches, Hillsborough Leaders Network, and Hillsborough Churches events. I live in Hillsborough area. Always had a passion for deep unity ever since, well, very soon after deciding to follow Jesus at the age of 15. Deep unity among Christians, and also with my life experience for real discipleship and for the whole church to usher in the kingdom. And so it was just fantastic being with these guys last week and seeing what City Vision is about. I look forward to continuing, hopefully, by God's grace, my involvement.
Thanks, Sanjay. Appreciate that.
Thanks for welcoming us. Thanks.
Yeah. And thank you so much, Don and Co, for allowing us onto whoever's front living room it is or whatever it is. I can't see too. And then we have Eva, who's come to Wakefield recently, who is a pastor with her husband in the Latvian church. And these guys have brought fire and love and the spirit to our city. And I'm so grateful. Do you want to say a few words, Eva?
Hi, everyone. Yes, I am Latvian and living in UK only 9 years. In my worship is my core, and that's what I'm doing all my life. I'm like 30 years in ministry and with a missionary's heart. And right now I feel like I'm on the mission in Wakefield, UK. And I'm looking forward where God will take me with City Vision next year. May God bless you all.
Thanks, Eva. And you worship leaders over there who have blessed us 20 minutes ago, you and Eva, you would have a great time. This lady knows how to lead us into the presence of worship. It's beautiful. It's absolutely wonderful. So we've prayed. So we'll dive in. This is, I would love to go around the room with you. I love to get to know people, but I just feel you're quite small on screen, you're distant. And so forgive me if I don't invite each of you just to introduce yourselves. Yeah, that would be my heart, but I'm going to plow on. So you have got your favorite parts of scripture, and I've got mine. And one of my favorites that I speak about probably more than most is Genesis 24. To remind you, the story is that Abraham is looking for a bride for his son Isaac. And he sends Eliezer, his right-hand man, to go and find a bride. And as you follow the story, and he says, my angel will go through with you. And if you recall the story, he ends up at a well. He's trailing 10 or a dozen camels behind him, and he prays a very quiet prayer in his heart and said, Lord, let the woman who says, not only would you like a drink at this well, but can I provide water for your camels? Let her be the one. And as he recounts the story to her father later on, he said, I had no sooner finished speaking in my heart, and she came up and said, can I get water for you, and can I get water for your camels? That beautiful encounter, that divine encounter, but he had eyes to see and to recognize God in that simplest of encounters. Why do I love that so much? Because Jesus said, I don't do anything except what I see the Father doing. And this issue of seeing what the Father is doing right in front of us, to me, is key. That if we are not led by the Spirit and able to discern, and we all get it wrong, sometimes it is our imaginations, but other times it's Him. If we learn to walk together as a body wherever we are in any city, to discern what He is showing us, the keys He is giving us, then the city will be unlocked. They won't always respond as we want, but we will have been obedient to the Father. And so I say all that as a precursor because as a specialist management consultant for over around 40 years, I'm going to show you some typical management consultant diagrams. You can't be a consultant without any diagrams. It's just not known. But I don't want you to be distracted by those because they can be very seductive. It's about getting the process right. The process without being led and hearing God's weight hearing God's go, hearing God's not that person, but this person. Those processes without that could be actually quite dangerous and destructive. There'll be a work of the flesh. And we must first, I know I'm speaking to people who know the Lord and love the Lord, but I don't think we can stress enough that being led by the Spirit is what's going to get the job done, because he knows. So, and there's so much I could say about that, but I just wanted to open up, because we might be we will be looking at some things that are quite structural. And God is systematic, otherwise we wouldn't have a solar system, we wouldn't have structure to our bodies, but he's also supernatural. And it's how, in the transformation of a city, does the supernatural work with the systematic. So I'm going to be looking quite a lot tonight at the systematic, but we must not forget that the invisible first is the seeking first, and the seeing of the kingdom. All this other stuff is peripheral to what are you showing me now, Father? What are you saying about this person or that person or this situation? So hopefully, I'm presuming, Don, if this is okay, that quite a bit of this will be a rerun of last time, because there will be people in the room who didn't know.
That was very good.
Dennis will be relieved, because I'm one of those people, not quite. That is a colleague. That's a whole other story. Guys just phoning in from Tanzania, but that's real. So Dennis is a very wise advisor to me, and I am of the ilk as a communication consultant. That's my background. Why use one word when you can say 100? It goes a bit like that with slides. Why only one slide when you can use 100? So Dennis just shakes his head, and can't you just do 3 or 4? So I've cut from last time, Don, about 100 slides down to about 50. I'm doing my best, but
That's a big improvement. Yeah.
So let me try and find where it is, and I'm going to talk for overall about 20 minutes. Dennis will speak for 5 or 6 minutes, and then we'll have some conversation, because it's your job to weigh, obviously, what you're hearing and say, where do we want to go next? I will give you some options, but you don't have to take any of them. I want you to go the way that God is leading you. We are here to serve you. We're not selling anything. We want to bless, wash your feet, and as far as we can, be Jesus to you, as you want to be Jesus to those that you meet. So having said that, I will get, so we can share the screen. Isn't it fantastic that we can do this from 3,000 or 4,000 miles away? I think it's so neat. Sharing is not turned on, so whoever's in control of Zoom, they need to press it.
Over here, share.
Oh, a send request.
No,
there.
request. He's got it. Oh, yeah. On multiple.
That's great. Thank you. Oh, participants can see your application. That's straight. Where have we gone? Let's start again. Now, I don't know what you can see and can't see. Yep. So are you able
monkeys and bananas?
You can see monkeys. Good,
yep.
good.
Monkeys and banana.
Right.
Have to guess which one is Brian.
Thanks, Dennis. One talking on the banana phone.
But by the way, I did mean to say, as thoughts come into your mind, God-given or just good questions, please do write them down. The way this whole thing is going to work, as you're going to find, is that we don't have to answer them tonight. I'm going to show you a way that we can continue this conversation without being here all at the same time, and you can continue it amongst yourselves. And what comes up tonight, those questions that come to mind, are likely to fuel a lot of the conversation going forward, but we'll see. So why have I shown you this AI generated little cartoon? I put into ChatGPT, give me a cartoon of of monkeys passing bananas between the cage, and I thought it's done quite a good job, actually. Why did I ask it that? A lot of years ago, 30, 35 years ago, one of the things that I did, a part of my job, was to make business-to-business videos. And a managing director had just taken over quite a large engineering company. And I was in dialogue with him about making a program on his company so that the company could tell its story. And he'd just taken over and he got a number of divisions. I said, how's it going, Philip? And he came out with a classic response. He said, they're not passing the banana between the cages. They weren't sharing information amongst themselves. I forget his surname. It begins with Lou, is his Christian name. But a previous chief executive, CEO of Hewlett-Packard said, if Hewlett-Packard knew all that Hewlett-Packard knows, we would be 3 times as profitable. And I would take that and say, if the church knew all the church knows, we'd be 1,000 times more impactful. So how do we pass the banana between the cages? How do we help people in cities to function far more effectively, Christians to work together? Let me tell you a story that came over. Brian was with us when we were down in London last week. And a lady I'd never met before called Lydia, I said, what do you do? She said, I run a mother's ministry. Oh, sorry, mums on the street, mothers on the street. Now, I don't know how much her church leader was able to support her, but I would imagine that was quite a lonely role. I found myself thinking, I bet within a few square miles, there are probably 10 other Lydias who have got the same heart that she's got, who have never met each other, who don't know of each other's existence, and Lydia will go on alone. How could those other people with the same heart as Lydia meet, even know of each other's existence, know of each other's passions, and how could they come together? And how could they be helped to work together to extend the ministry of Jesus on the streets? Let me give another example. Let's say somebody else in her church was one of your sons or brothers or cousins, a young man or woman in their early 20s. They've got a real heart to open a Christian business. But let's say their busy pastor just doesn't have the time, or they're not aware of that. How does that young man or woman find the other, and they probably do exist, 10, 12, there might be many more, other young Christians who have a heart for opening a business for God's glory? How do they find each other? How do they connect? Or let's say there's a pastor, let's say his name's Sam, and he's from Africa, and he wants to minister back into Africa, but he's short of funds and time, and he can't get back, he can't leave his church to go for a week or two. How does he find the other dozen ministers who also would like to work together? What's the mechanics of that? How do they discover it? Yes, the Holy Spirit can lead them together, but can't we create an environment, an ecosystem by which people can find each other and work together and collaborate and pass the banana? And that's something that I've done in business, as I'll be describing you. And that whole idea of what happens, can those with a heart for Jesus in Hamilton collaborate, pass the banana, share the knowledge and work together more? That's what we're going to be looking at. So here's a little thing. Don't worry if you can't see. There's a whole range of ministries across the top. And there's a whole load of churches down the left. And it may not be Lydia and mums on the street. The red dots just represent different Christians who would like to do something but don't, because they don't know each other and they can't. But here is the example in prison visiting, where there is a potential ministry team, if they were brought together, a centre of excellence they could encourage if brought together and nurtured. Or maybe it's not a prison ministry, maybe it's a sports ministry. Same issue. How many in Hamilton are there, young men and women, maybe not so young, who've got a heart for developing they simply don't know each other, don't know how to connect and find each other? Or a potential church planters, or those who have got a heart for business, who want to start business or minister to business. So that's what we're going to be looking at. Maybe it's not churches in Hamilton, it's different cities. So here's a list of cities that we are very much at these very, very first steps, as we are with you in Tampa, Toronto. I'm calling wider Toronto, the area broadly that you're in. No, but that's not offending anybody. London, San Francisco, so on.
London, Ontario.
Across the top again, ministries. On this red one, it's just an example. Youth evangelism, and in Johannesburg. Is it possible that God has put some secrets on how to multiply youth evangelism in Johannesburg? That because we're not talking to them, and we don't know. Or the yellow one, drugs in Sydney, or the green one, what's that? Food poverty security in San Francisco. Is it possible that not only within a city we can enable people to find each other and work together and release them? Is it possible that we can find other specialisms around the world and connect with them? That's behind this old idea of knowledge sharing and working together. What's my background? I'll be very brief on this. That is about 2/3 of the team that I had when I sold the business 5 years ago. I had 100 people. Started it 23 years earlier, just myself and my wife, who I've got my arm around, who's in the other room. And that's a whole other miracle story of how we came together. And we sold the business 5 years ago. And we had a small number of people in the States. We had about 10 people in Australia and the rest here. And if you'd have told me as a kid, one day you'll buy that, I would have said to you, from where I've come background, I don't know what you're talking about. Miraculously, 25 years ago, we bought this place. It's just down the road. And God just brought and helped us to build a business. You'll recognize some of the names on there. We didn't do any business in Canada, strangely, but quite a lot in the US and America and the Australia and the UK. Where I was up to, just at the point of selling the business, has a lot to do with you guys sitting in that room tonight, where you are. At that time, one of my clients was British Airways. And I'd said to British Airways, why don't you and Qantas, why don't we work together on this knowledge sharing basis to get 20 of the world's largest airlines together in Dubai or Paris, and we'll build a knowledge sharing community. I'm not going to play the whole video. I'm just going to play a minute of it. Oh, that may not have worked because I didn't synchronize the sound and the video. Just bear with me. Share, optimize sound. Right, it's not allowing me. It's because it's your. This may not work because I can't optimize the video, but I'm going to play a minute of it anyway. Now I've completely lost where I was. That's the wonder of technology. I am now, help me, pray for me. I am now lost somewhere in cyberspace.
It's happened to all of us.
Right, it happened to all of us, yeah. I don't know where the presentation's gone now. So the presentation's there. Right, I'll just play a few seconds of it. Now I've got to find you guys.
We can see you. All good.
I'm very satisfied or comforted that people like Bill Gates can stand up in front of things and people can go, right, I'm muttering on that. Hopefully it'll work. Right, I don't know whether you can see this or not. Wave if you can see.
We can.
Yeah.
Okay.
We can hear it as well.
We're just here today at the headquarters of British Airways, about half a mile from Terminal 5, actually on the site of where, if there is a third London runway, it will come right through here. But the subject that we're here to talk about is a very exciting conference that's coming up in October in Paris. And I'm going to let Fraser and later Michael Clancy from Qantas talk to you about the conference, why they're going and why we think you should come. Fraser, a few months ago, we started talking about the possibility of having an airlines conference in Paris.
So Jesus said the children of this world are often wiser in the things of this world than the children of the kingdom are in the things of the things of the kingdom. And basically, I believe the world can be so much, the Christian world can be so much better at sharing its knowledge, passing the bananas. I grew over about 8 years, a community in the UK of 1,000 quite large companies, and saw how knowledge can be shared and the acceleration that happens when people work together. And that has really fueled an awful lot of what we're talking about here. To what extent does Hamilton want to share knowledge internally within Hamilton, to share its knowledge and learnings with other cities around the world, to receive input from other cities around the world, and go on a learning journey of maybe over the next 5 or 10 years. So we're not talking about something light, simple, or instant. And that's the setting for this. What are we speaking into? Why are we even bothering to do this? And I'm going to hand over to my colleague and friend and brother, much loved brother, Dennis, if I can get the tech to work here, who's just going to give you some background as to the importance of us being far more effective in our working together and our collaboration, and more long-term in our thinking. Is that all right, Dennis?
Yep.
Anything you want to edit about what I've said, brother, that I've missed? You think, why hasn't he said so and so before we dive in? No.
I'll just correct it all now. No, I'm kidding. It was great. Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, so
it was excellent.
Hopefully,
yes. If you wouldn't mind. Well,
right.
Yeah.
Now I've completely lost you. Can you see you? I can't see you. I don't know why it's gone.
I can see me, but I can't see the I can't see
There we go.
the slide.
Share. There we go. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know.
It's really
Really weird. What can you? Oh, there you are. You slid off the bottom of the screen. That's why you're sneaking off, Dennis.
There we are.
There we are. Right. Tell me.
Okay. Right. Let me go. I'm going to struggle 6 minutes, but I'll try and be as quick as I can.
No, that's okay.
That's all right. I think what I want to do, in some ways, I want to be the bringer of the challenge and the bad news in a way. Before Tony can talk about a lot more about the good news. Why do we need? Why is it not a luxury to be united? You know, Jesus prayed in John 17, Father, may they be one, so that the world will believe that you have sent me. And I think the challenge is that over decades and centuries, the church has not been particularly good at being one. So I want to just talk about some things that I've experienced recently that I think really are key to this, why it's imperative that we as the church. I was in Nepal recently, Kathmandu, speaking to a large gathering of pastors, all who led their own streams of churches, and they actually didn't like each other. They envied each other, they fought against each other, and it was difficult enough to get them in the same room. But I remember I started by saying to this crowd of pastors, I know how many churches there are in Kathmandu. And they said, how can you possibly know how many churches there are? We don't even know how many churches there are. So I do, I can be exact. I can tell you exactly how many churches there are in Kathmandu. And they said, how many are there then? And I said, you've probably guessed it. I said, one. There's only one church, because Jesus is building one church, and it's his. It's not ours. It's not our denominations. It's his. It's one church that he's building. So let me just leave that thought in your mind for a moment. And then let me tell you about, I was in Mombasa, Kenya recently, and something happened when I was in Mombasa, Kenya, just completely helped me to rethink through the absolute urgency of the church rediscovering what Jesus prayed in John 17, that we would be one church. So we did one of that. We do things called rooftop encounters, and we did one with about 500 or 600 leaders in this city and Mombasa. And after we did it, we had lunch I had lunch with some of the pastors, and I said to one of the pastors over lunch, I said, tell me about Mombasa. He said, it's 50% Christian, but 50% Muslim, but that's going to change. And I hoped he was going to say there's going to be a great revival. God, the Holy Spirit's going to move, and Mombasa is going to become set on fire with the gospel. But he didn't say that. I said, why is it going to change? He said, because the Muslims are doing 3 things. And I said, what are they doing? He said, the first thing they're doing, and this is why this image is here, the first thing they're doing is they're buying all of the most influential buildings. Many of these used to be British colonial buildings once upon a time. They were very much equated with Christianity going to Africa. But they're buying all of those buildings and they're Islamizing them. So that building you're looking at is on the shore, right as you come into Mombasa from the river. That's right up on the coast. It's the first building you see when you come into Mombasa. It used to be a building that represented Christian faith. Now, as you can see, what they've done is they've literally built a facade all around it and Islamized it. And they're doing that with all the buildings they can in the most influential parts of the city. The reason they're doing that is because they want people to feel as though they're living in a Muslim city. The second thing they're doing is they're ensuring that Muslims are promoted to places of prominence in all of the 7 spheres of society, making sure that all of those spheres are led by people who are Muslim. so that the city doesn't just look Muslim, but it thinks and acts Muslim as well. The third thing they're doing, he said, is they're going to pastors of churches and they're saying to the pastors, become a Muslim and we'll give you a better house to live in and we'll pay you a salary. I then asked him, what is the church doing? What's the church's response to this? And he said, we come together on Sunday in our churches, we sing to Jesus and ask him to send more people to church. That's why it's changing. Because the Muslims, this is what he said, it was so powerful. He said, because the Muslims have a strategy, which is to say, how do we create the soil of Mombasa in such a way that what naturally grows out of that soil is Islam? He said, but the church doesn't have that strategy. The church's strategy is so fractured and broken as each church often tries to do its own thing and thinks of itself as doing its mission. And the church down the road is doing its mission and the church over the street is doing its mission, rather than recognizing there's one Jesus, one mission and one church. I then went for a little walk down to that building up there, and I met this young guy called Ahmed. He was a Muslim, and he wanted to talk to me because I'm an old British guy, and he's got 5 brothers in London. So he came up and introduced himself, and we started talking. And I spoke to him about a number of things. I asked him the same question, what's happening in Mombasa? And he said, well, it used to be a Christian city, but it's becoming a Muslim city. And then I asked him this question. I asked him many, but I asked him this one. I said, Ahmed, which mosque do you go to in Mombasa? And he looked at me with a big smile on his face. And he said, haha. He said, all of them. We're Islam. We're changing the city. The churches, he said, they all go to their own little church and do their own little thing. That's why they'll never change the city. And when I reflected on those two things, it just absolutely made me see clearly that there's something, this is not an anti-Islam address I'm giving here. I'm just saying that what is clear, and of course Islams do have fractures as well, but largely their strategy is to change the macro picture of a city so that what grows in that city is much more naturally Islam. I was in a little cafe on the edge of London just the other day, and this blew my mind as well. And I was sitting in this little cafe on Zoom. After my Zoom call, there were 2 young Asian men sitting on the table next to me. And I heard one of them say to his friend, he said, I'm studying the history of the French Revolution at the moment. And I listened in, and his friend said, why is that? He said, I want to see how a sovereignty, a government can be overthrown, because I want to learn how we Muslims can do that in Great Britain. And this is just a young guy. You would have thought he'd be having a cup of tea and wanted to go and watch cricket or football or whatever, but that's what he talked about. So I just say that. And let's also be aware of this. It's not just the Muslims. Next slide, Tony, please, if I may. If you wouldn't mind being... I often show this bridge. I'm not sure I hope you can see that image clearly. If you can see it, you might detect there's something not right about the image. And I'm sure you've worked out what it is. And I'll tell you if you haven't, the bridge is not crossing the water. That's called the Choluteca Bridge. It's in Honduras. And when they built that bridge in the late, I think it was the 90s, they said this bridge is going to be indestructible. It's never going to fall. It's going to be the best built bridge in Honduras. And then not long after they built it, the great big storm, hurricane, blew through Honduras, and the bridge was left absolutely intact. Most of the other bridges were destroyed, but the Choluteca Bridge was left completely unharmed. It was so well built. But the river moved. The hurricane was so strong, it actually changed the course of the river. And they now call the Choluteca Bridge the bridge to nowhere. And the reason I show that picture is because I think in many ways that shows the challenge facing us as the church. There was a time